Please welcome Governor Josh Shapiro, Suyen Barahona, and President Bill Clinton.
Well, here we are. I want to thank both of you for being here and explain to all of you why we asked them to come together. The Americans here know that Josh Shapiro may be sitting on the most important time bomb in America.
No pressure.
We're waiting to see how Pennsylvania votes. But I wanted you to know, because before he was governor, he was attorney general, and he has worked very hard to make people in his state, without regard to party, believe in a democratic system, in the integrity of the vote, and the fact that wherever you are in your journey, you can get a fair deal there. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of people who are working hard to convince people of the opposite. Then, Suyen lives a different reality. And she has to pay the price, or has had to for a long time, of being without a democratic fallback, an alternative. So I want you to hear their stories and think about yours. And think about the world we're going into. For those of you who've been here a lot, you know, I don't have to read these notes. I think we're living in a totally interdependent world. Divorce is not an option. The only question is, how will we respond to our interdependence? And a lot of people believe, as I do, that we should all live under the same set of rules, and that we should guarantee that everybody has a chance to live their dreams and take care of their children. A lot of other people believe the main purpose of civic activity is to guarantee a dominance to the people who look and think and act as they do. So we asked these two people here to make the case that in good times and bad, free people are more likely to make better decisions if they follow a set of accepted rules. And you can see the worst that can happen is that you're about to hear from two totally remarkable people. And you'll be glad you did. So, Governor Shapiro, let's start with you. Before the world thought America would always be hanging by a fingernail waiting for Pennsylvania's votes to come in, you were already there, and as Attorney General, you had some responsibility to make sure you had an honest political system and one that worked. Have you succeeded, and do you think it's as important as you always did? And why?
Well, Mr. President, thank you for hosting us. And it's an honor to be here on this panel with you and to engage in this important conversation. I guess I would begin by saying no one ever succeeds in democracy or in guaranteeing a free society. it's always a work in progress. I'm honored to serve as the 48th governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And in my office in the state capitol in Harrisburg, there are portraits of those who came before me. And so I am literally judged every day by William Penn and Ben Franklin looking down at me. Ben Franklin, after signing the Constitution, walked out on the streets of Philadelphia, the cobblestone streets. He was met by a fellow Philadelphian. She looked at him in the eye and said, "Mr. Franklin, do we have a monarchy or a republic?" Franklin looked at his fellow Philadelphian and said, "We have a republic if you can keep it." And so I very much believe that it is my responsibility, not just because Franklin was a predecessor, sounds crazy to say, but as an American, that I have a responsibility to keep it every day. As Attorney General, I was called to court 43 different times when the former president and his allies sued us. First, to make it harder for people to vote, and then second, to make it so those votes wouldn't count back in 2020. By the way, he went 0-43, we went 43-0, and we had a free and fair, safe and secure election, and our democracy continued. It's not lost on me that our courts held, but also that even though we were successful, the work continued. And that work continues to this day. There are real threats against our democracy. And while office holders have a responsibility to do our jobs in order to protect it, the truth is, as Franklin challenged us to do, it's ordinary Americans who have the responsibility to rise up and demand more and seek justice and always look for a way that we can be more free, more fair, more just, either through their own actions or by calling on their elected leaders to take certain acts. And so I very much view this as a work in progress, one that began in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, one that I feel we have a unique responsibility to defend, and one that I'm working my tail off on every single day to make sure that this wonderful experiment in democracy continues.
Thank you. So, Suyen, your political life has been somewhat different. Your experience has been different. Tell them about it and where you are now.
Well, first of all, I just want to express my gratitude and my sense of humbleness, also being here with all of you, change makers, trailblazers, and thank you so much to CGI and to you, Mr. President, for having me here. I am from Nicaragua. I've been a human rights activist, I've been a feminist, and been involved in the last 2 decades in the struggle for democracy and justice in my home country. For those of you who don't know where Nicaragua is, it's right in the center of the Americas, not the US, the center of the Americas. I got involved in politics because I am a firm believer that to strengthen democracy, we need belligerent civil society, social movements, independent social movements, pushing those agendas, but that we also needed more women to be, to hold those positions of power in politics, and that we needed to work together to move forward agendas for human rights and democracy. And I got involved in politics because at that point we also saw a group of many other women, the broader women's movement, saw the beginning stages of the consolidation of a dictatorship in my country. Unfortunately, that is what has happened. It is a dictatorship, a family dynasty, where there is the head of the government, Daniel Ortega, is called the president, and then his wife is the vice president. And they have established a brutal dictatorship. And in the run-up to the elections in 2001, 6 months, before the elections, as many of us were demanding free and fair elections, and after also a set of years of uprising and also, unfortunately, crimes against humanity that have been committed and thousands of incarceration, groups of candidates for the presidency, human rights defenders, peasant farmers, youth activists, we were sent to prison. I was taken from my house in the presence of my 4-year-old son and disappeared for about 81 days. And under conditions of torture, I spent 606 days in prison along with others. My case is not only mine. Unfortunately, 5,000 Nicaraguans have gone through this experience, and millions of women are going through this experience. There was a special viciousness against those of us who were women, and 4 of us from the political party that I led. I was the president of that political party, UNAMOS, and it was because they wanted to let us know that the political space is not where we should be, and so I was kept in isolation for the whole time. I was finally able, along with 222 political prisoners, to be released last year, thanks to negotiations. Almost hostage negotiations between the U.S. government, who offered to bring us to the United States. So they released us, and as we were flying, we were stripped of our nationality, and all of our properties have been seized, and then of course also we were banished from our country. So I'm here actually under very extraordinary circumstances, because I was banished and stripped of my nationality, and that's been also the case for another group of 135 political prisoners that have been able also to be released in Guatemala. You know, I think one of the objectives of the dictatorship was to really break me, break my passion, break my dreams, and I think they failed miserably. I am here today, and I've been very fortunate in terms of having an opportunity of leading a new fund. It's called the Colmena Fund. It used to be called the Women's Political Leadership Fund, but it's a fund that wants to accelerate the power of women political leaders in the global South, especially women who are coming from most marginalized communities. And it's a fund, it's called Colmena because in Spanish, Colmena means hive, and it wants to celebrate the power of the community of women political leaders around the world. It's a global initiative. So not only am I continuing the struggle for democracy in Nicaragua and denouncing the brutal dictatorship that continues, but I have used, I think, that pain, but also the anger too, and have channelized it now in continuing the struggle and working towards supporting women to advance their power and in the global South.
Thank you. So, Governor, does it surprise you that there have been so many attacks on the American electoral system and attempts to sow distrust in it and to break it down? And what should we do about it generally? I mean, I was stunned the other day to see that our Georgia had required that all ballots henceforward be hand counted, which, you know, if it were in some circumstances, it might make you think they'd be more honest, but it's almost impossible to avoid all the possibilities for mischief if you have millions of votes and they all have to be hand counted. The Indians, interestingly enough, who have, you know, it's now the largest country in the world, they have dual placement of all their machine-issued votes. They send one copy of the ballot to the local community and another copy to the national capital simultaneously. And all parties have access to the place where they're cast. So now in America, we've got an enormous effort, anyway, in many places, to make the system more arbitrary and more subject to local influence. So what should we do about it?
Mr. President, I think there's a political answer and a governmental answer to the underlying question you're asking. First, let me take the governmental side. We should all agree on a few foundational principles about this nation and how our elections are run, right? We value our freedom. We cherish democracy. We love the country. And then we could fight like hell about healthcare policy or some other thing. And that while we may exercise partisan tendencies in an election, the administration of those elections should really be nonpartisan. It's one of the reasons why my first appointment in my cabinet for our Secretary of the Commonwealth, that's the person who oversees the elections, was a Republican. I'm a Democrat. That should be a nonpartisan exercise where you focus on including more people in our democracy, not excluding anyone. It's one of the reasons why I use my executive authority as governor to bring automatic voter registration to Pennsylvania. So you go to the DMV, get your license, get your ID card, you're registered to vote. We've seen a 90% jump in the number of people registering to vote just because of that. And by the way, it's about an even split, Republicans and Democrats. Nobody got an advantage because we want to administer the system in a fair way. I'm confident that Republican and Democratic clerks alike in Pennsylvania will again do their jobs to make sure we have a free and fair, safe and secure election. That's the governmental side of it. There's a political side to this that's really dangerous, where you have one candidate, one party, seeking to limit who gets to participate in the process. Because A, they want to score an advantage, as opposed to building a coalition. They want to limit who gets to sit at the table. If you want to go back in history and look at who figured out how you got to grow the tent and build a coalition, see Bill Clinton, 1992, 1996 in Pennsylvania. So politically, they want fewer people at the table because they feel like that gives them a shot to win. But there's something really deeper and more dangerous for our democracy beyond one election cycle. And that is, if you're showing up to try and lead the country, lead the state, lead the city, and you don't want certain people to vote because you don't believe their voices matter, you don't want them to sit around the table of progress, you don't want to hear what they have to think, then ultimately you're creating not just a dangerous short-term political situation, but a much more dangerous long-term political situation where you are forcing people to be in a situation where they feel like they are an other, where they feel like they're a second-class citizen. And that doesn't work in a democracy in the long term. And that just creates adversity, it creates a level of anger, it creates a situation where the system can't work as effectively. We have to get back in this country to a place where we want to encourage participation, encourage a love of democracy and country, and then fight like hell based on our ideas and build coalitions that are big and broad on our views and our values. And we're getting too far away from that. The good news is the people who have sought to create others in society, the people that have sought to push people aside and not include them at the table of progress, they tend to lose most races in America. And that's a good thing for the long-term health of our nation.
Thank you. When you hear the governor talking about this, and you think about what Nicaragua's been through, does it feel strange to you?
Actually, I want to share that as we're seeing more and more discourses of like populist discourses around the world, it reminds me a lot of also the beginning stages of what was happening in Nicaragua too. And I feel that it's important to look at these experiences and to understand that dismantling democracy is a process, sometimes of many years, and that there are early signs that we sometimes do not pay attention to until it's very, very late. You know, that has happened, I think, throughout many countries in the world. The international community has also missed those early signs until it's this bad as it is in Nicaragua. And I just want to say, you know, the dismantling of democracy in my country began with the co-optation and controlling of the judicial system and trying eliminating the competition so that basically you were having elections where there really wasn't a competitor or was also basically stealing, robbing the elections, the control over all of the branches of governance and doing away with the checks and balances and doing away also with the rights of civil society, the capacity to mobilize, to organize. More than 5,000 organizations have been dismantled, civil society organizations. There are no journalists, independent media open in the country, and you see how important it is, you know, all of these components in order to be able to have a healthy democracy, no? But it's that early sign of the co-optation and the control of the judicial system is essential. And then, of course, it's been a dictatorship that has been ruling out of terror, no? The control of the military and the police. And as we're doing now also this work around the fund, the Comina Fund, and looking at the experiences of women around the world, I do want to say that what we're seeing globally is that women are delivering. That's what's working. We are working. We are at the forefront. We are they're leading the transformation and sometimes the struggle to sustain democracy, to advance democracy in so many parts of the world. You're seeing how women are effective leaders at the local level, at the national level. The results that you see in terms of inclusive policies, in sustained peace agreements sometimes, and the important role that they're playing in economic growth. There is evidence that are demonstrating that us women, we are effective leaders, yet you know, we continue to be underrepresented, and including here in the U.S. and in other countries that are
about to change that.
Call themselves strong democracies. In this super election year, you know, we've committed a study that's showing that basically 2/3 of the countries who've held elections just this year, there's a reversal in terms of women's political representation. And of course, we want to go beyond just the representation. It's not only about numbers. It's about really women having the power to move forward their agendas and transform and to have inclusive policies and just transform their communities and to be able to strengthen democracy. And that requires, of course, tackling the barriers, violence, the lack of funding, the need for violence. I want to highlight the violence. Like 82%, of the women parliamentarians have said that they are facing harassment, misinformation campaigns. This is all deeply, deeply impacting really our democracies, and this is happening in the global south and in the north, in countries like the U.S. And so we want to catalyze funding so that there's more funding for women political leaders, especially those who are coming from more marginalized backgrounds, because to be the only indigenous woman, at the table, or an Afro-descendant, or from the LGBTQ communities, all of that violence is heightened, and we want to really change this ecosystem. We need to come together to actually generate an ecosystem that can support women leaders to be able to thrive, to enter in politics, to be able to get elected, but especially to be able to thrive and deliver on those agendas. And that's part of what we're working. And this is a challenge in democracies also like the U.S.
Thank you. Well, if I could put the two together, we want a world in which women can thrive as political citizens and in other ways, which means that when they run, if they win, they win, and if they lose, they lose, but we don't get the two mixed up. And we still have many countries in the world where after the elections come in, most everybody doesn't believe them. So as we break here, because we're overtime, but I thought they were so good, I hated to interrupt them. I don't think they were. I've actually lost 2 elections in my life, and I hated it. Anybody that tells you you can learn more from losing than winning hasn't lost enough. On the other hand, it made me feel even better when I was able to overcome those defeats. In other words, the thing about a free system is you have to trust the voters and you have to be prepared to lose, as well as determined to win. And we're basically living in a world today where either there is no democratic option or where people would like it if there seemed to be one, as long as they always win. And I've done this a long time, and I don't think anybody ever loved politics itself any more than I did, who got to be president. I loved it. But you don't always get to win, especially if you believe in anything. Sometimes, I remember I lost I see some of my Georgetown University classmates here. I once deliberately lost a student election because I didn't want to liberalize the curriculum. And that was viewed as a very reactionary position. My point is, if you really want more women and more diversity in politics, it has to be safe and supportive, but you also have to have an honest system for counting the votes. And we also all have to be prepared to lose if we want our winning to mean anything. And I'm very worried now all over the world that people feel less and less able to accept the honesty of the results. So I ask you all to think about that. I hated getting beat, but it was part of the deal. And it's what made the debates honest. It's what made the fight honest. It's what's made the election night gripping. And if you really want to be free, you have to be free to win and free to lose. And I could also like to say, I hope I speak for everybody, that I'm glad there's someone like you in the world trying to bring these opportunities to people in every country. And I'm glad, Governor, that we got someone like you in a profoundly important position who is widely viewed not only as a great leader, but as completely straight, playing it down the line, fair to everybody. If we're ever going to bring our societies that are fractured back together, people have to believe that there are still people like you, not just in the history books, but going to work every day.